my hand at that moment were 2 small pills. The doctor had said just 2 were enough to send a full-grown adult into an eternal sleep. I was 13 years old, and I didn't intend to use them on myself. I was looking at the man sitting at the kitchen table, gulping down whiskey, and a single question echoed in my mind. Is this the only way out? For 60 years, I buried that moment. But today, sitting here with a warm cup of coffee and the sound of my grandchildren playing in the yard, I know I have to tell it. Because sometimes, to truly live, we have to confront our darkest choices. If you are listening from anywhere in the world, please leave a comment and subscribe, because there are truths that need to be spread, even if they might shake your beliefs. There are stories, no matter how painful, that must be told. Good afternoon, my friends. I am Genevieve, and this is the story of how a young girl had to choose between becoming a victim or becoming a resistor, and how that choice led me to the peaceful life I have today. I was born in 1,952 inches, Canoga Park, in a simple little house in the Old Depot district. It was a different time, my dear. The streets were still dirt roads, and when it rained, it was a mud pit that never seemed to end. Our house was close to the train tracks. I remember the noise it made when it passed. Everything would shake. The cups would dance in the cupboard. My mother, Patricia, always ran to hold the plates. We were a simple family. My father, Frank, worked for the Southern Pacific Railroad. A quiet man of few words, but with enormous hands calloused from hard work. He would leave before the sun rose and come back when it was already dark. My mother took care of the house and did laundry for other people. I helped her from a very young age, carrying buckets, ironing the simpler clothes. Her hands were red and chapped from the harsh soap, but I never heard her complain. We had a modest life, but we didn't face severe hardship. My mother knew how to work miracles with very little. A single potato could become a full meal. A small piece of meat would stretch for everyone. At our little dark wood table, we would gather for dinner. Me, my parents, and my brother Christian, who was 2 years older than me. Christian was my protector. When the other kids at school picked on me because of my red hair, a rare thing back then, which got me called Carrot Top, he was the one who defended me. You mess with my sister, you mess with me, he'd say, puffing out his scrawny chest. Then, on the way home, we'd laugh while kicking pebbles down the street. The school was a 20-minute walk away. We went on foot with our notebooks tied together with string. The teacher, Mrs. Peterson, a thin woman with gray hair always tied in a tight bun, had a ruler she would slap on her desk when the class got noisy. Genevieve, read the next paragraph, she would command. And I would tremble, the letters dancing before my eyes. I liked to study, but I was too shy to speak up. Our childhood was simple, full of games that nobody knows anymore. We played jacks with pebbles, hopscotch drawn on the ground, and hide-and-seek among the clotheslines. In the summer, when the heat was intense, my mother would fill a large basin in the backyard, and we would cool off, splashing water everywhere. She would pretend to scold us, but then she'd join in, dipping her feet in the water, laughing like a little girl. Bathing back then was an event. We didn't have an electric shower. The water was heated on the wood-burning stove and poured into a metal tub. First my father would bathe, then my brother, then me, and finally my mother. That's how we saved water. In the harsh California winter, that warm bath was a blessing. My mother would scrub my back with a rough cloth, humming old songs. Life went on like that, predictable and safe, until I was 9 years old, when everything started to change. My mother started to cough. At first it was just a little dry cough that she'd try to hide by covering her mouth with her apron. Then the cough got stronger, and sometimes it came with a red-stained handkerchief that she would quickly hide when she saw me. In the winter of 1962, when I was 10, my mother's cough got much worse. The doctor came to our house one night. I remember him coming in with his black bag, the strong smell of medicine in the air. That night I heard my father crying in his room. It was the first and only time I ever saw that strong man shed tears. My mother had tuberculosis. In those days, that was almost a death sentence. They tried to admit her to the sanatorium at Olive View Hospital, but it was already too late. She wasted away quickly, like a candle blown out by a strong gust of wind. In 3 months, she was gone. I remember the simple coffin, the wildflowers we picked for her, my father's restrained sobs, my brother's trembling hands holding mine. Grief covered our house like a heavy blanket. My father became even more withdrawn. He started drinking on weekends, sitting for hours in the kitchen chair, staring at nothing. Christian and I took over many of the household chores. At just 10 years old, I was already cooking, washing, and cleaning. My small hands tried to imitate my mother's gestures, but nothing felt right without her. It's often said that nature abhors a vacuum. When a family loses its heart, something or someone will always rush in to fill the void. But as Genevieve would soon learn, not every new beginning is a blessing. Let's find out what happens next. 6 months after my mother's death, my father came home with someone. A tall, thin woman with straight black hair walked into our kitchen. Her name was Catherine. She had a cold, calculating look in her eyes. "Kids, this is Catherine. She's going to take care of you and the house now," my father announced without looking directly at us. It wasn't a request for permission, it was a statement. Catherine wasn't a bad woman, not entirely. She kept the house in order, cooked well, but there was no warmth in her actions. Her hands never stroked our heads. Her voice never hummed while she worked. She was as efficient as a machine. 3 months later, they got married in a quick ceremony at the courthouse, and soon after, the news came. My father was being transferred for work to another city. Christian, who was 13, would stay in Canoga Park with an uncle to finish his studies. I, however, would have to go with them. I cried, hugging my brother goodbye, promising we would write letters every week. And so, at 11 years old, I left Canoga Park with my father and his new wife. Our destination, Bakersfield, where my father would work on the railroad expansion. It was 1963, and I didn't know that this move would be just the beginning of a path far darker than I could ever imagine. Away from my brother, from the house where I grew up, from the friends I knew, I was alone with 2 adults who seemed to grow more distant from me with each passing day. Arriving in Bakersfield was like entering a strange world. The city was bigger than Canoga Park, with the Kern River cutting through it, imposing and mysterious. Our new house was on a street with uneven cobblestones, not far from the station. It was an old building, with high windows and floors that creaked with every step. It had a large backyard with an old fig tree that seemed to watch everything with its twisted branches. The first night, lying in bed in a room that wasn't mine, I cried softly, hugging my pillow. I missed Christian, our little house in Canoga Park, even the sound of the train that used to wake me up. Here, the silence was heavy. The first few weeks were about adjusting. My father left for work early and came back late, always tired. Catherine kept the house in order. She enrolled me in a new school, took care of the meals. She wasn't affectionate, but she wasn't cruel either. She was just absent, even when she was present. The school was 10 blocks away. I walked alone, hurrying past children I didn't know. In the classroom, I sat in the back, trying to go unnoticed. My accent from Canoga Park, slightly different, made some classmates laugh, but slowly I made a few friends, Jasmine and Tessa, 2 girls my age who welcomed me during recess. The months went by. I wrote to Christian every week, telling him about school, my new friends, the city. He replied less frequently. His letters were short, but they always ended with, "I miss you, sis." Those words were like a hug that crossed the distance. At home, things began to change subtly. My father started drinking more and more, not just on weekends now, but almost every night. He would come home staggering, his voice louder, his eyes red. Catherine would receive him in silence, helping him to bed. I would pretend to be asleep, listening to the muffled voices, the heavy footsteps in the hallway. One day, shortly after my 12th birthday, my father didn't come home from work. Catherine was nervous, pacing back and forth. When night fell, there was a knock on the door. It was one of my father's colleagues, a man in a railroad uniform, his hat in his hands. He spoke in a low voice with Catherine. I watched from my bedroom doorway, my heart pounding. There had been an accident. A train car had derailed. My father was checking the tracks. He didn't stand a chance. Died instantly, they said. I remember Catherine sitting in the kitchen chair, staring into space, without tears. I cried for both of us, For my father who would never come back. For my brother who was now even farther away. For my mother who was no longer there to comfort me. The funeral was quick, with few people present. They tried to locate Christian, but my uncle's address had changed. We sent a letter, but we didn't know if it would arrive in time. It didn't. We returned home, Catherine and I, two strangers united by grief. It was on that night that I realized something had fundamentally changed. Catherine was sitting in the living room when a man arrived, tall, stocky, with a thick mustache and small, hard eyes. "This is Martin," she said dryly. "A friend of my late husband. He's going to stay with us for a while." Martin had large, rough hands and a strong smell of cigarettes that clung to the air around him. His gaze lingered on me in a way that made me want to hide. When he smiled, his yellowed teeth showed from behind his mustache, but the smile never reached his eyes. "What a pretty little girl," he said that first night, reaching out to touch my hair. I recoiled instinctively. Catherine watched the scene without expression. That single, chilling touch is where the real nightmare begins. It's a silent declaration of ownership, and Catherine's cold indifference is a terrifying sign of what's to come. This man isn't just visiting. He's moving in, and as we'll soon discover, he has a horrifying plan. In the following days, I discovered that Martin wasn't just passing through. He brought bags, many bags. He settled into what had been my father's room, as if it had always belonged to him. At night, I could hear him talking with Catherine in the kitchen, their voices low, conspiratorial. "The insurance will pay out well," I heard him say one night. "But it's not enough. You need to think about the future, Catherine." 2 weeks after the funeral, Catherine called me to talk. She sat across from me with an expression that tried to be kind, but looked like a poorly fitting mask. "Genevieve, things are going to change a little," she began, her hands restless on the table. "Your father, he didn't leave much. The insurance money barely covers the debts he had. I can't keep this house on my own." I looked at her, not fully understanding. Martin has a small business in Tehachapi, a trucking company. He offered to take us in. We're going to live there. He's going to take care of us. Tehachapi, another city, even farther from Canoga Park, from Christian, from everything I knew. I wanted to protest, to scream no, that I wanted to go back to my brother, but the words got stuck in my throat. I was 12 years old. I had no choice. We left 2 weeks later. I left Jasmine the address where we were going, asking her to write to Christian if he ever looked for me. I packed my few belongings in a small bundle, a faded photo of my mother, an embroidered handkerchief she had made, a few letters from Christian. Tehachapi was an even smaller town than Bakersfield, located in the center of the state. The house we moved into was dark, with narrow hallways and cold floors. It was in the back of a large warehouse where Martin kept his 2 trucks. The smell of diesel and grease permeated everything. It was in that house that I began to understand the true meaning of fear. It became clear that Martin was more than just a family friend. Soon after we moved, they announced they were getting married. "It's more practical this way," Catherine explained, her voice devoid of emotion. "He'll be your stepfather." Now, Catherine changed after we arrived in Tehachapi. She became quieter, more submissive. She obeyed Martin in everything, never questioning his orders. He, on the other hand, became the absolute master of that small, dark kingdom. His voice echoed through the walls. His heavy boots announced his arrival. His unstable mood determined what the day would be like. In the first few months, Martin kept a certain distance from me. He would watch me during meals with those small, cold eyes, making comments about how fast I was growing up. When he passed me in the narrow hallway, his hands would occasionally touch my shoulders, my hair, in a gesture that seemed casual but left a trail of discomfort. I started attending the local school but made no friends. I kept to myself, invisible. I would come straight home, help Catherine in the kitchen, and do my homework in a corner of the table. At night, I locked myself in the small room I was given, pushing a chair against the door that had no lock. 2 weeks after we arrived at the house in Tehachapi, Catherine got sick. A high fever that wouldn't break, a dry cough that painfully reminded me of my mother. The doctor was called, prescribed medicine, rest. During Catherine's illness, I was the one who took over the household chores. I cooked as best I could, cleaned, and washed Martin's heavy clothes, which came back stained with grease and dust from the roads. He watched my efforts with a half smile on his face, sometimes commenting, "You're turning into a real little woman, huh?" One night, as I was washing the dinner dishes, Martin came into the kitchen. He was shirtless, wearing only a pair of old pajama pants. His broad chest was covered in graying hair. His protruding belly hung over the waistband of his pants. He stood behind me, so close I could feel his smell, a mixture of sweat, cigarettes, and something I only later understood to be whiskey. "You're doing a good job, Genevieve," he said, his voice slurred. "Your stepmother is sick, but you're taking good care of the house." I mumbled a thank you, my eyes fixed on the dishes, my hands trembling slightly in the soapy water. "You know, a woman needs to know how to take care of a house," he continued, moving even closer. "But she also needs to know how to take care of her man." His large, rough hands landed on my shoulders. I froze. He brought his face close to my ear, his hot, heavy breath against my skin. "When you finish up here, go take your bath. I left a clean towel for you." That was the first time I noticed that the bathroom door had no lock. It was a small, dark bathroom with a metal tub where we heated water for baths. As the water heated on the stove, my heart pounded. There was something wrong, something in the air, in Martin's words, in the way he looked at me. I filled the tub with hot water and a little cold, trying to prolong the process as much as possible. I got into the water, trying to relax, trying to push away the growing sense of danger. That's when I heard the footsteps in the hallway, heavy, deliberate. My heart stopped when the bathroom door opened. Martin was standing there, filling the entire doorway, his small eyes fixed on me. I shrank into the tub, trying to cover myself with my arms, with the scarce soap foam. "No need to be ashamed," he said, his voice different now, lower, more sinister. "We're family, aren't we?" I squeezed my eyes shut, praying for him to leave, for Catherine to call for him, for anything to happen. But nothing happened. He just stood there, watching me in the increasingly cold water. After what felt like an eternity, he finally spoke the words that would mark the beginning of my nightmare. "I won't stop until you're pregnant." It wasn't a wish, not a casual threat. It was a sentence, a plan, a terrible promise that made the warm bathwater feel like it was freezing around my body. With those words, the bathroom is no longer a place of cleansing. It becomes a torture chamber. Genevieve is now a prisoner in her own home, facing a threat that feels utterly inescapable. How can a 1-2-year-old girl fight back against a monster like this? Stay with us as her struggle for survival truly begins. That night, I cried silently in my room, the chair pressed firmly against the door. But I knew it was just a symbolic barrier. If he wanted to get in, he would. I began to understand that I was caught in a trap, with no apparent way out, far from my brother, with no money, knowing no one in town, completely at the mercy of a man whose eyes revealed intentions that a 1-2-year-old girl was beginning to comprehend with growing terror. The next morning, Catherine was still in bed, her fever still high. Martin left early with one of the trucks, saying he'd be back in 2 days. Those were 2 days of respite, of desperate planning. I thought about running away, but to where? How? With no money, not knowing the roads, with nowhere to go. I wrote a letter to Christian, addressing it to our uncle's house in Canoga Park, knowing it would probably never arrive. In it, I told him everything, begged for help. I went to the town post office, used the few coins I had saved to buy a stamp. It was a desperate cry for help cast into the wind. When Martin returned, he brought gifts. A dress for me, light pink with little flowers, a size smaller than I wore. "You'll look pretty in it," he said, his eyes scanning my body in a way that made me feel dirty. For Catherine, he brought cough syrup. "You'll get better soon," he said, but there was something in his tone that suggested he didn't really care. That night, the bathing ritual repeated itself. The hot water, the footsteps in the hallway, the door opening. This time, Martin said more. Words I don't want to repeat, words no girl should ever have to hear. I lay motionless, my eyes closed, praying for it to be over soon. When I finally got out of the bath, he was gone. I ran to my room, getting dressed on the way, my heart pounding like a drum, the chair against the door, the covers pulled up to my chin, my eyes wide open in the darkness. That's how the cycle of terror that would dominate the following years began. The nightly baths became a ritual of fear. Martin was always there, watching, commenting, threatening. "I won't stop until you're pregnant," he would repeat like a terrible mantra. "You'll be my little woman. You'll give me children." Catherine recovered from the fever, but something in her had changed. She became more distant, more faded. She saw what was happening, but she closed her eyes, turned her face away. Once I tried to talk to her, to tell her about the baths, about Martin's words. She cut me off abruptly. "Don't make things up, girl. He's just looking after you." My dears, I know that listening to this, many of you might feel angry with Catherine, and I was too for a long time. But looking back now, I understand that fear can turn a person into a shadow of themselves, making them complicit in evil just to survive another day. She was a victim too, in her own way. School became my only refuge. The hours when I could escape that house. I studied hard, losing myself in books, in lessons, trying to forget, trying to create an alternate world where I didn't have to go home. It was at school that I met Mrs. Davis, a woman with gray hair and kind eyes who taught English. She noticed the change in me, how I had become quieter, more withdrawn. One day, she called me over after class. "Is everything okay at home, Genevieve?" she asked in a gentle voice. I wanted to tell her everything, to scream for help, but the words wouldn't come out. The fear was greater, the fear of not being believed, the fear of making things worse, the fear of Martin finding out. "Yes, ma'am," I replied, my eyes fixed on the floor. "I just miss my brother." "If you ever need to talk," she said, gently touching my shoulder. "I'm here." That gentle touch, that sincere offer of help almost broke my resolve. I almost ran into her arms, almost told her everything, but I didn't. In that moment, I couldn't. At night, at home, the ritual continued. The bath, Martin, the door, the words, the fear. Every day he became bolder, closer. His hands were no longer content with just touching my hair. I would shrink, try to cover myself, try to disappear into the water. And every night, before I went to sleep, I would examine my body with growing terror, looking for signs of the pregnancy he promised, the final prison that would tie me forever to that man, to that house. Every month that passed without that sign was a small miracle, a brief respite, a stay of execution. That is how I lived my 13th year, between the fear of the nightly baths and the constant anxiety, watching my body change, develop, knowing that every change was noticed by those small, cold eyes that watched me in the water. The days turned into weeks, the weeks into months. Every day was like the one before. Every night brought the same terror. I became an expert at predicting Martin's moods, at interpreting his footsteps in the hallway, at knowing when it was best to hide and when it was inevitable to face his presence. The winter of 1965 was particularly harsh. The biting cold of California seemed to seep through the cracks in the walls, through the worn floorboards. The water for the bath took longer to heat up, and I would drag out the process as long as I could, postponing the nightly ritual. But he always came, as inevitable as the night. "You're taking too long," he complained one night, his voice altered by the whiskey. "The water's going to get cold." The visits to the bathroom became longer, more intense. Martin was no longer content with just watching. His large, rough hands began to touch the water, to play with the thin foam. Soon, he would say, his eyes fixed on me. "We'll see if there's a little baby growing in there." I lived in a constant state of alert. I slept little, ate poorly. At school, my grades started to drop. Mrs. Davis called me in again, worried. "Genevieve, you're thinner. You have dark circles under your eyes. Are you sick?" "No, ma'am," I replied, avoiding her gaze. "I'm just not sleeping well." "Why?" she insisted. I hesitated. Something inside me wanted to tell her, to scream for help, but the fear was greater. The fear of what Martin would do if he found out. "Nightmares?" I finally answered. It wasn't a lie. My life had become a nightmare. At home, Catherine was becoming more of a shadow each day. She rarely spoke, rarely left her room, except to cook and clean. When Martin wasn't around, she would sit in the kitchen chair, staring at nothing, as if she were absent from her own body. Sometimes she had a dry cough that painfully reminded me of my mother. One night, while I was washing the dinner dishes, I overheard a conversation between them. They were in the living room, their voices low but audible in the small house. "She's old enough now," Martin was saying. "She's a woman now." "She's only 13, Catherine replied, her voice weak but with a rare tone of defiance. "At your age, many are already married," he retorted. "Besides, she's not your daughter or mine. She's just a girl we're raising out of charity." Those words hit me like a punch. I was nothing to them, not a daughter, not a stepdaughter, just a girl, a burden, an object. That night, in the bath, Martin was different, more daring, more determined. His hands were not content with just the water. "It's time," he said, his voice hoarse. "I've waited long enough." I shut my eyes tightly, silent tears streaming down my face, mixing with the water that now felt ice-cold, despite the steam still rising from it. When I was finally free from that bathroom, I ran to my room, my legs trembling, my heart racing. That night, lying in bed with the chair pressed against the door, I made a decision. I couldn't go on like this. I had to do something, anything. The idea of a pregnancy, of being forever trapped with that man in that house, was unbearable. The next morning, during breakfast, Catherine coughed violently. A trickle of blood ran from the corner of her mouth. She wiped it away quickly with her napkin, but I saw the terror in her eyes. She knew what it meant, the same thing that had taken my mother. Martin saw it too. His expression hardened. "I'll call the doctor," he said curtly, with no real concern in his voice. Dr. Evans came that afternoon, an elderly man with trembling hands and thick glasses. He examined Catherine in the bedroom while Martin and I waited in the living room. When he came out, his face was grave. "It's tuberculosis," he said quietly to Martin. "Advanced." "How long?" Martin asked, his voice cold. "Hard to say. Months, maybe weeks. She needs to go to a sanatorium." Martin shook his head. "I don't have money for that. She'll stay home." The doctor sighed, defeated. "Then she needs care, absolute rest, medicine." He wrote a prescription, handed it to Martin. "And you two need to be careful. It's contagious." After the doctor left, Martin sat down heavily in the kitchen chair. His eyes met mine, and I saw something new there. Calculation, planning. "You'll take care of her," he ordered. "Give her the medicine, make her food, clean up." I nodded in silence. I had no choice. The following weeks were a blur of exhaustion. I would wake up early, prepare breakfast for Martin, take care of Catherine, go to school, rush back, prepare the lunch I'd leave ready for when Martin returned from his trips. I cleaned the house, did laundry, gave Catherine her medicine, studied when I could, and prepared dinner. At night, the bath ritual continued, but now there was a new dimension of horror. "Don't worry about her illness," Martin would say as he watched me in the water. "When she's gone, it will be just the two of us. You, me, and the child you're going to give me." The idea of being alone in that house with Martin, without even the distant, apathetic presence of Catherine, was terrifying. I began to plan my escape with greater urgency. I started saving coins, a dime here, a quarter there, from the change when I went to buy bread or medicine. I hid them in a hole I made in my mattress. It wasn't much, but it was something. At school, Mrs. Davis continued to watch me with growing concern. One day, after class, she stopped me again. "Genevieve," she began in her gentle voice, "I'm very worried about you. You're getting thinner and sadder every day. I know your stepmother is sick, but is there something else going on?" I looked at her, at those kind eyes, and I almost broke down. I almost told her everything, but fear paralyzed me again. Instead, I asked, my voice barely a whisper, "Ma'am, how much is a bus ticket to Los Angeles?" She looked at me, surprised. "Why do you want to know?" "My brother. He's in Canoga Park. I want to visit him." "I see," she said thoughtfully. It probably costs about $20, more or less. It's a long trip. $20. I had maybe saved $5. I would need much more time. Can't your stepfather take you? Mrs. Davis asked. The panic must have shown on my face because she frowned, concerned. Genevieve, if something is wrong, you can tell me. I can help. I shook my head, my eyes burning with unshed tears. Everything is fine, ma'am. Thank you. That night, when I got home, I found Catherine sitting in the kitchen, paler than ever. She looked at me with an expression I had never seen before, a mixture of fear, regret, and something deeper, sadder. He left, she said, her voice weak. He's not back until tomorrow. I nodded, feeling a brief sense of relief. One night without the bath ritual, without the eyes, without the hands. Sit down, Catherine said, gesturing to the chair across from her. I need to talk to you. I sat down, apprehensive. Catherine never wanted to talk. I know what he does, she began, her eyes fixed on the table. I know what happens in the bathroom. I sat motionless, my heart hammering in my chest. Why don't you do anything? I finally asked, my voice trembling with suppressed anger. Why do you let him? She coughed, a harsh sound that shook her frail body. At first, I thought he was just looking, that he would never go further than that. She paused, struggling to breathe. Then it was too late. He is a dangerous man, Genevieve. Very dangerous. What do you mean? Her eyes met mine, and I saw terror in them. I think Martin killed your father. A 1-2-year-old's world is such a fragile thing, my friends. And with that one sentence, Catherine shattered mine into a million pieces. In that moment, I was no longer just escaping an abuser. I was trying to escape the monster who had devoured my family. And with that one sentence, the game has completely changed. This is no longer about enduring abuse. It's about escaping a murderer who has methodically destroyed her entire world. The question is no longer if Genevieve will run, but how, and if she can possibly succeed before he realizes she knows his darkest secret. The world seemed to stop. What? I whispered. The accident on the railroad. It wasn't an accident. Martin was there that day. He knew the foreman. He wanted to have me for himself. He always did, but your father was in the way. I felt sick, my stomach churning. Why are you telling me this now? Because I'm dying, she answered simply. And because I fear what he will do to you when I'm no longer here. Help me escape, I pleaded, grabbing her cold hands. Give me money for a ticket. I can go to Los Angeles, find my brother. She shook her head. I have no money. He controls everything. But, she hesitated, looking around as if she feared the walls had ears. He has money hidden. A lot of money. Where? In the office in the warehouse. Behind the tool cabinet, there's a compartment. The key is in the pocket of his pants, the ones he hangs in the bedroom. I could hardly believe what I was hearing. Catherine, who had always been so passive, so complicit, was now offering me a way out. Why now? I asked. Why are you helping me now? Her eyes filled with tears. Because I don't want another sin on my conscience when I meet God. I have too many already. I didn't sleep that night. I planned every detail, every move. When the day dawned, Catherine was worse. A high fever, the sheets stained with blood from her nightly coughing. I took care of her as best I could. I gave her the medicine the doctor had prescribed. Is Martin coming back today? I asked, trying to keep my voice casual. Only tonight, she replied, her eyes half closed from pain and exhaustion. He sent a message with Joey, the helper. He's having trouble with the truck. It was my chance, maybe my only one. I waited until mid-afternoon, when Catherine finally fell asleep under the effect of the medication. I tiptoed into their room, my heart beating so loudly I feared she could hear it even in her deep sleep. Martin's pants were hanging behind the door, as always. With trembling fingers I searched the pockets, coins, a pocket knife, a dirty handkerchief, and a small brass key. I left the house through the back, crossed the small yard to the warehouse where the trucks were kept. The smell of oil, diesel, and rubber was strong. The office was a tiny room in the back, with an old desk covered in papers and a rusty tool cabinet. I moved the cabinet with effort, the metal scraping against the concrete floor. There, just as Catherine had said, was a small, almost unnoticeable door in the wall. The key fit perfectly. Inside, I found a metal box. I opened it with trembling hands. Stacks of money, more than I had ever seen in my life. Large, new bills, arranged in meticulous piles. I took enough for a ticket, maybe a little more. I didn't want to take too much. He would notice immediately. I closed the box, put it back, shut the little door, and pushed the cabinet back into place. I hid the money in my underwear, the only place I knew it would be safe. Back in the house, Catherine was still asleep. I packed a small bundle with the essentials. My mother's photo, the embroidered handkerchief, a change of clothes, Christian's letters. I hid it under the bed. The plan was simple. The next morning, I would say I needed to go to the pharmacy to get more medicine for Catherine. Instead, I would go straight to the bus station. There was a bus to Los Angeles at 8:30. I would be far away before Martin noticed. But plans rarely survive contact with reality. Martin arrived earlier than expected. I heard the sound of the truck in the yard as the sun was beginning to set. The familiar terror settled in my chest. I checked that the money was still well hidden, that the bundle wasn't visible under the bed. He stormed in like a tempest, his face red, smelling of whiskey and the road. "Where's dinner?" he yelled, throwing his cap on the sofa. "I'm about to make it," I answered, trying to keep my voice steady. I was taking care of Catherine. "She's worse today." "Always an excuse," he grumbled, heading towards the bedroom. "I'm going to take a shower. When I get out, I want food on the table." The shower. Always the shower. But this time was different. It was he who was bathing, not me. A small relief in a sea of anxiety. I started preparing dinner, rice, beans, a bit of leftover meat from the day before. My hands were shaking, but I tried to focus. Tomorrow, I would be far away from here. Tomorrow, I would start a new life. Martin came out of the shower, wearing only pants. He sat at the table, poured himself some whiskey into a dirty glass. "The food's almost ready," I said, avoiding his gaze. He took a large gulp of the drink, his small, hard eyes fixed on me. "Do you know what day it is today?" he asked. "Tuesday," I answered automatically. "No, you idiot. It's the 10th. The day I checked the money. The blood froze in my veins. The 10th. How had I not remembered? Every 10th of the month, he counted the hidden money, writing down every cent in a little black notebook. He's going to know, I thought, panic rising. He's going to know I took it. "Finish that food," he ordered, getting up. "I'm going to the warehouse. I'll be right back." When the door slammed behind him, I almost fainted from terror. It was a matter of minutes until he found out. What would he do? Where would I go? I ran to Catherine's room. She was awake, her eyes bright with fever. "He's back," she whispered. "And he went to check the money," I replied, my voice trembling. "Catherine, he's going to kill me." She closed her eyes for a moment. "In my nightstand," she finally said. "Bottom drawer. There's a brown bottle." It was for when the pain got unbearable. I opened the drawer with trembling fingers. A small, unlabeled glass vial. Inside were white pills. "What is this?" I asked. "Morphine," she replied. "Strong. The doctor said 2 could kill a man." I looked at the vial, at the pills, at Catherine. Was this it? Was this the only way out? Before I could answer, I heard the front door being thrown open violently. I hid the vial in my apron pocket, my heart hammering in my chest. "Genevieve!" Martin's roar echoed through the small house. I came out of Catherine's room, closing the door behind me. He was in the living room, his face twisted with rage, his fists clenched. "Your father was a thief, and so are you," he yelled. "Where is my money?" "I don't know what you're talking about," I tried, my voice betraying my fear. His hand moved so fast I didn't have time to dodge. The slap hit my face with force, throwing me against the wall. The pain exploded, hot and sharp. "Don't lie to me," he hissed, moving closer. "You were there. You took my money." "Where is it?" Another slap, harder, the metallic taste of blood in my mouth. "Please," I begged, tears streaming down my face. "I didn't take anything." He grabbed me by the hair, dragging me across the living room. Let's see if a cold water bath helps you remember. The bathroom. Always the bathroom. But this time there was no hot water, no pretense of a ritual, just pure brutality. He turned on the faucet, filling the tub with ice-cold water. Take off your clothes, he ordered. No, I whispered, terrified. His eyes narrowed. Take them off, or I'll rip them off you. My hands moved slowly to the buttons of my dress. Every movement was agony, every second an eternity. The vial of pills weighed heavily in my apron pocket. My only chance. I need to use the toilet, I said suddenly. He laughed, a humorless sound. How convenient. You'll have to hold it. Please, I insisted. I'm on my period. I need to clean myself. This made him hesitate. The idea of menstrual blood repulsed him. I knew it. It was the one thing that kept him at a distance on certain days. 5 minutes, he finally conceded, and leave the door open. I nodded, heading to the small toilet attached to the bathroom. The door didn't close completely, but it offered some privacy. With trembling hands, I took the vial from my pocket. 2 pills kill a man, Catherine had said. I crushed 3 between my fingers, reducing them to a fine powder. Where to put it? How to make him take it? The whiskey. He always drank during dinner. If I could just get back to the kitchen. Put it in his drink. Time's up. Martin's voice thundered. Get out here now. It was too late for the whiskey plan. I put the powder back in my apron pocket, my heart heavy. What followed was a nightmare of cold water, pain, and humiliation. Martin forced me into the tub, holding me under until my lungs burned for air. When he let me surface, it was only to repeat the same question. Where is my money? Finally, exhausted, defeated, I had no choice. In my room, I whispered between sobs. Under the mattress, he pulled me out by my hair, forcing me to stand. Let's go get it. Shaking from cold and fear, I wrapped myself in a thin towel. He dragged me down the hall to my room. He lifted the mattress with one hand, while the other still held my arm in a brutal grip. There it was, the coins I had saved for months, not the money I had taken from the hiding spot. That was still hidden in my underwear, now wet and thrown on the bathroom floor. This? He roared. Is this it? Where's the rest? There's no more, I sobbed. That's all. I was saving it to buy a present for Catherine. He threw me on the bed with force. Liar, he hissed. You filthy liar. You know what happens to thieves in my house. His belt made a whistling sound as he pulled it from his pants. I closed my eyes, bracing for what was to come. That's when we heard the sound. A dull thud from Catherine's room, followed by a long groan. Martin hesitated, the belt still raised in the air. What was that? She must have fallen, I replied, seizing the distraction. She was very weak today. He swore under his breath. Stay here, he ordered. We're not finished yet. When he left the room, I let myself fall onto the bed, exhausted and defeated. The escape had failed. The money would be discovered eventually. There was no way out. It was then that I saw it. In his haste, Martin had left his belt behind a thick, leather belt with a heavy metal buckle. A weapon, if used the right way. I got up silently, picked up the belt. Its weight was comforting in my hand. I approached the door, listening. But as I heard his heavy footsteps returning, panic seized me. A direct fight was impossible. I dropped the belt on the bed. My only thought now was to escape. I ran to the small window facing the yard. Every plan has failed. Every hope has been crushed. All that's left is the raw, animal instinct to survive. In a moment like this, a desperate leap into the unknown feels safer than staying one more second in that house. But as we're about to find out, this chase is far from over. Voices came from Catherine's room. Martin scolding, Catherine coughing and groaning. It was my chance, my only chance. Standing at the door of my room, Martin's belt held firmly in my fingers, I listened to the voices coming from Catherine's room. She was coughing violently, and he was grumbling irritably. Stop that, woman. Can't you see I have more important things to deal with? My heart was beating so hard it felt like it would burst from my chest. My hands were shaking, but I held the belt with determination. I had no plan beyond that moment. Hit Martin with all the strength I could muster and run. Run where? I didn't know. I just knew I had to end it that night. I took a deep breath and stepped into the hallway. That's when I heard a sound that chilled me to the bone. The clinking of glass. Martin had found the vial of pills. "What is this?" I heard him ask. "Morphine? The doctor gave you this?" Catherine's response was too weak for me to understand. Then Martin's voice again, louder. "You've been hiding this from me. Do you know how much this is worth?" I backed into my room. If he was finding the pills, he would soon turn his attention back to me. I wouldn't stand a chance against him in a direct confrontation, even armed with the belt. I looked around, desperate. My small window faced the back, towards the yard and the warehouse. It was narrow, but maybe. I dropped the belt on the bed and tried to open the window. It was stuck. Years of humidity had swollen the wood. I pushed with all my might, feeling my nails break against the frame. Finally, with a sharp creak, the window gave way. The cold night air flooded the room. I looked down. It wasn't a big drop, maybe 6 feet to the dirt ground. I could do it. I had to do it. I turned back to get the small bundle I had prepared, hidden under the bed. As I bent down to reach for it, I heard Martin's heavy footsteps in the hallway. "That girl is going to pay," he growled, his voice altered by anger and drink. There was no more time. I abandoned the bundle, went back to the window, and swung my legs out. The moment I launched myself into the yard, I heard the door to my room being thrown open violently. "Get back here!" Martin's roar cut through the night. I landed hard on the ground, pain exploding in my knees and the palms of my hands, but fear was stronger than pain. I scrambled to my feet and ran towards the warehouse. If I could hide among the trucks, maybe I'd have a chance. The warehouse was dark, with only the faint moonlight filtering through the cracks in the roof. I slipped between the 2 trucks, breathing in the strong smell of oil and rubber. I heard the house door slam and Martin's voice shouting my name. "Genevieve, you have nowhere to go. Come back now, and maybe I'll be merciful." Mercy. The word sounded like a cruel joke. Martin didn't know the meaning of mercy. I huddled in the space between the wall and the older truck, praying the darkness would protect me. Through the cracks in the warehouse walls, I could see Martin's silhouette in the yard, his massive figure cut out against the light from the house. "I know you're in there, girl," he called out, his voice now falsely sweet. "Don't be foolish. It's cold out here. Come back home." Home. That place had never been my home. It was my prison, my personal hell. Martin began to approach the warehouse. He knew. He knew that's where I had run. I had nowhere else to hide. It was then that I saw it. The office door was ajar, the office where the money was hidden. I crawled silently in that direction as I heard Martin's footsteps nearing the main entrance of the warehouse. The office was small, cramped. There weren't many places to hide. The desk, the tool cabinet, some boxes stacked in a corner. The boxes. Maybe I could hide behind them. I had barely gotten into position when the light came on. Martin was at the door, a lantern in his hand, his face twisted in a mixture of anger and triumph. "Gotcha," he said, advancing towards me. I backed against the wall, trapped. He placed the lantern on the desk, his small, hard eyes fixed on me as he began to unbuckle his belt. "Disobedient little girls," he snarled, "have to learn." Tears blurred my vision. This was the end. I closed my eyes, bracing for the first blow, but it never came. Instead, I heard a weak cough from the doorway. Martin turned, surprised. Catherine was there, leaning against the doorframe, paler than ever, her face glistening with feverish sweat. "Leave the girl alone," she said, her voice weak but determined. Martin laughed, a joyless sound. "Get back to bed, woman. This is none of your business." "It is my business," she replied, taking a shaky step into the office. "All of this is my business. I allowed it. I knew, and I did nothing." "Catherine, go back to the house," Martin ordered, his voice hardening. "You're sick. You don't know what you're saying." "I know exactly what I'm saying," she retorted. In her hand, something glinted in the lantern light, a glass. "Genevieve, come with me." I looked at Martin, at Catherine, at the door. If I ran now, maybe I would have a chance. She's not going anywhere, Martin growled, taking a step towards me. It was then that Catherine did something I never imagined. She laughed. A weak laugh, broken by coughs, but a laugh nonetheless. What's so funny? Martin asked, irritated. You, she answered. So worried about your money, about your power over us, you didn't even notice what's happening. What are you talking about, woman? Catherine gave a weak, tired smile. While you were busy terrorizing a child, did you think I was just lying in bed helpless? The whiskey you just drank. The one from the bottle on the kitchen counter. Martin frowned, a flicker of confusion in his eyes. So what? I didn't just drug your glass, Martin, she said, her voice gaining a surprising strength. I crushed the pills and put them into the entire bottle this afternoon. I knew you'd get to it eventually. I was just waiting. Sometimes, my dears, strength isn't the roar of a lion, but the quiet patience of a spider spinning her web. In all her silence, Catherine had been weaving her own trap of revenge, and that night, the monster walked right into it. Martin's face transformed comprehension, disbelief, rage, all in rapid succession. You wouldn't, he whispered. I already did, she replied. And you know what? I don't regret it one bit. Martin took a step towards her, his hands outstretched like claws, but then he staggered, leaning heavily on the desk. What? What did you do to me? What I should have done a long time ago, Catherine answered. Genevieve, come now. I didn't need another invitation. I ran to Catherine's side, staying as far as possible from Martin, who was now slumped over the desk, his breathing heavy, his face flushed. You're both going to pay, he slurred, his voice already thick. I'm going to kill you both. You're not going to do anything, Catherine replied with a calmness she had never shown before. Not ever again. We left the office, closing the door behind us. I heard a dull thud, Martin falling, perhaps. Catherine locked the door with the key that was in her robe pocket. Is he going to die? I asked, trembling. No, she answered, her voice weak. I didn't put enough for that. But he'll be asleep for a long time. Long enough. We went back to the house, Catherine leaning heavily on me. Every step seemed to cause her immense pain. When we reached the kitchen, she collapsed into a chair, her breathing ragged and noisy. I need to go to the hospital, she said between coughing fits. I don't have much time. I'll get help, I promised. No. She grabbed my arm with surprising strength. First, listen to me. We don't have much time. I sat across from her, still shaking from the night's events. The money, she began. The money you took. Where is it? I hesitated, then confessed. In my underwear. In the bathroom. Go get it. Now. I ran to the bathroom, found my clothes still wet on the floor. The money was there, damp but intact. I returned to the kitchen. There's a bus to Los Angeles at 6 a.m., Catherine said, each word a visible effort. You're going to take it. You're going to find your brother. You're going to start over. And you? I asked. She smiled sadly. I'll go to the hospital afterwards. Well, it doesn't matter. What matters is that you'll be far away from here. Martin will come after me, I said, the fear returning. He'll find me. No, he won't, she answered with a strange certainty. He'll have too many problems here. What do you mean? She coughed, a trickle of blood running from the corner of her mouth. I'm going to the hospital. I'm going to tell them everything. About the abuse, about you, about how he threatened me all these years. I'll tell them about my suspicions about your father's death. Will they believe you? I asked skeptically. Maybe not, but the doubt will be planted. And he knows it. He knows that even on my deathbed, I can destroy his reputation in this town. I understood then. It wasn't just about giving me time to escape. It was about revenge. Catherine's revenge against the man who had controlled her, manipulated her, and used her as a pawn in his cruel games. There's something else, she continued, opening a drawer in the kitchen table. From it, she pulled out a yellowed envelope. These are letters from your brother, letters that Martin hid from you. I took the envelope with trembling hands. There were at least 10 letters, all with Christian's name as the sender. He wrote, I whispered, tears in my eyes. Many times. Martin intercepted the letters. He didn't want you to know. He didn't want you to have hope. I opened the first letter, dated 6 months ago. Christian's familiar handwriting filled my eyes with tears. Dear sis, it began. I'm worried about you. Why don't you answer my letters? I'm living in Los Angeles now. I work at a mechanic shop. The address is on the envelope. Please, write to me. I need to know if you're okay. Los Angeles. Christian was in Los Angeles, no longer in Canoga Park with our uncle, but in the city, and he had an address, a place to go. Why are you doing this now? I asked Catherine. Why not before? She lowered her eyes. Fear, cowardice, shame. Pick whichever reason you want. They're all true. But now I'm dying, Genevieve, and I want to do at least one right thing before I go. The night was long. Catherine told me everything. How Martin had always been obsessed with her. How he had been furious when she married another man. How he had come to my mother's funeral not to comfort but to take advantage of the situation. How he had carefully planned to get my father out of the way, to take us far away, to isolate us where no one knew us. He always wanted a family, she said, her voice growing weaker, but on his terms controlled, submissive. When you came of age, when he realized he could use you, she didn't need to finish. I understood now. I understood everything. As the sky began to lighten, Catherine was worse. The fever high, her breathing labored. I helped her get dressed, to get ready. I'm going to call Mr. Harrison, the neighbor, she said. He has a car. He'll take me to the hospital in Lancaster. It's better than the one here. And me? I asked. You're going to the bus station. The first bus. Don't look back, Genevieve, just go. We said our goodbyes at the door of the house. Me with my small bundle, now recovered from under the bed, and Martin's money safe in my pocket. She, leaning on the doorframe, more a ghost than a person, her face marked by illness and suffering. I'm so sorry, she said, tears streaming down her gaunt face. For everything. For not being strong enough to protect you. You're protecting me now, I replied, giving her a brief hug. It was the last time I ever saw her. This is the moment. The final goodbye to a complicated woman who was both jailer and liberator. Genevieve is finally on her way to freedom, armed with a destination and a chance at a new life. But escaping a prison is one thing. Healing from the wounds it left is another journey entirely. Let's follow her on that first bus ride to Los Angeles. I headed for the bus station, my heart heavy but determined. I didn't know what would happen to Martin when he woke up, what Catherine would say at the hospital, if anyone would believe her. I only knew that I was free. Finally free. The bus to Los Angeles arrived promptly at 6 a.m. I climbed the steps on trembling legs. I handed over the money for the ticket. I sat by the window, watching Tehachapi disappear as the bus picked up speed on the highway. I didn't cry. The tears would come later, many times, in many moments. But in that instant, I felt only an immense relief. Freedom, you see, isn't always a loud, joyous celebration. For me, in that moment, it was a deep, quiet stillness. It was the first breath I'd taken in years where I didn't feel a weight on my chest. That bus wasn't just taking me to Los Angeles, it was carrying me back to myself. The nightmare was over. The cold bathwater, Martin's eyes, his hands, his threats, it was all behind me. On the curves of the road, clutching the envelope with Christian's letters to my chest, I allowed myself, for the first time in a long time, to dream of a future. A future without fear. A future that at that moment seemed possible. And as the sun rose on the horizon, bringing light to a new day, I whispered a promise to myself, never again. Never again will someone have this power over me. Never again will I allow them to make me feel this way. It was the beginning of my liberation, the beginning of the journey that would lead me, many years later, to become the woman I am today. A survivor. A woman who learned the hard way the true meaning of strength. The trip to Los Angeles was long. The bus rattled on the country roads, stopping in small towns along the way. Sitting by the window, I watched the landscape change, the open fields giving way to bigger cities, more movement, more life. I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Martin's contorted face. I heard his threatening voice. So I would open them again, focusing on the scenery, trying to convince myself that the distance between us was growing with every mile. I arrived in Los Angeles late in the afternoon. The bus station was a chaos of people and noise, so different from the oppressive quiet of Tehachapi. I got off the bus with my few possessions, feeling small and lost in that vastness. In the letters, Christian had provided an address, Belmont Avenue, in the Echo Park neighborhood. I took the money that was left after the ticket, counted it carefully. It wasn't much, but maybe it was enough for a taxi. Asking about city buses seemed too intimidating at that moment. An elderly taxi driver, with a gray mustache and a kind smile, agreed to take me. "First time in Los Angeles?" he asked, watching my scared expression in the rearview mirror. "Yes," I replied, my voice small. I came to find my brother." "Ah, that's good," he commented. "Family is important. Has your brother lived here long?" "A few months. He works at a mechanic shop." The taxi cut through the city's busy streets. I looked in wonder at the tall buildings, the shops, the hurried people on the sidewalks. Everything was so big, so vibrant, so free. We arrived at the address after about 20 minutes. It was a quiet street, with simple but well-kept houses. I paid the driver, thanked him. I stood on the sidewalk, looking at the number indicated in Christian's letters. A light green house with a small porch. In the front yard, colorful flowers, a cheerful, welcoming house. With my heart pounding, I approached and knocked on the door. Footsteps on the other side, a woman's voice asking who it was. "I'm looking for Christian Rodriguez," I answered, my voice trembling. "He's my brother." The door opened, revealing a woman of about 60, with gray hair in a bun, her kind face marked by time. "Are you Genevieve?" she asked, her eyes widening. "Christian's sister?" I nodded, surprised to be recognized. "Oh my goodness," she exclaimed, opening her arms. "Come in, child, come in. Christian is going to be ecstatic. He's looked for you for so long." I entered hesitantly. The house was small but cozy. Photos on the walls, the smell of food in the air, a sense of home I hadn't experienced in years. "I'm Mrs. Thompson," the woman introduced herself, leading me to the living room. "Christian has been living with me for almost a year. He's like a son to me." How did he end up here?" I asked, sitting on the sofa she indicated. "Oh, it's a long story," she replied, sitting next to me. "But basically, Christian worked for my late husband at the shop. When Leonard passed away, Christian took over the business. He had nowhere to live. I had this house, too big just for me. It was a blessing for both of us." She looked at me carefully, noticing my tired appearance, my wrinkled clothes, the fear still present in my eyes. "You don't look well, dear," she commented gently. "Do you want to tell me what happened?" I opened my mouth, then closed it again. How could I explain? How could I tell a stranger the horrors I had lived through? "It's complicated," I finally replied. "I ran away. From Tehachapi. From my stepfather." Something in her eyes told me she understood more than I had said. An old wisdom, a female understanding that transcends words. "You're safe now," she assured me, squeezing my hands between hers. "This house is your home for as long as you need. And Christian is going to be so happy." The tears I had held back for the entire journey finally came. Thick, hot, liberating. Mrs. Thompson hugged me, letting me cry on her shoulder, murmuring words of comfort as a mother would. That's how Christian found us when he came home from work an hour later. I was still sobbing in Mrs. Thompson's arms when the door opened and he walked in. I didn't recognize him immediately. The scrawny boy I knew had turned into a tall young man with broad shoulders, his hands stained with grease, his face marked by hard work. But his eyes were the same. Kind, protective, full of life. "Christian," I called, my voice choked. He froze at the door, his eyes wide with disbelief. "Vive," he whispered, using my childhood nickname. "Is it really you?" I stood up, my legs wobbly. We looked at each other for a long moment, years of separation between us, an ocean of unshared experiences. Then, in a sudden movement, he crossed the room and hugged me. A hug so tight it almost took my breath away. But I didn't care. It was safety. It was protection. It was what I had longed for so long. "You came," he kept repeating, his voice thick with emotion. "You finally came." That night was one of tears, stories, revelations. Sitting at Mrs. Thompson's kitchen table, over plates of steaming soup and homemade bread, I told them everything. Dad's death, Martin, the baths, the threats, the constant fear. I told them about Catherine, her illness, how she had finally helped me escape. Christian listened to it all in silence, his fists clenched on the table, his face a mask of pain and contained rage. When I finished, he stood up abruptly, pacing the kitchen like a caged animal. "I'm going to kill him," he declared, his voice dangerously calm. "I'm going back to Tehachapi, and I'm going to kill him with my own hands." "No, Christian," I intervened, scared. "He's not worth it. He's not worth it. He abused you," he yelled, punching the wall. My little sister, Mrs. Thompson, who had listened to everything in silent solidarity, finally spoke. "Revenge won't erase what happened, Christian. It will only bring more pain. What your sister needs now is a new beginning, peace, security." Her eyes met mine, wise and compassionate. And justice, of course, but real justice, not revenge. In the following days, a plan was formed. Mrs. Thompson knew a lawyer, Mrs. Thompson knew a lawyer, Mrs. Thompson, Hayes, who worked on cases of violence against women and children. With my permission, she called her to talk. Miss Ever.Uck. Hayes was an impressive woman, tall, elegant, with a firm voice and a penetrating gaze. She sat with me for hours, listening to my story, taking notes, asking difficult but necessary questions. "We can press charges," she explained. "There are laws, even if they aren't always well enforced. But I need to be honest, it will be difficult. Your word against his. Without physical evidence, without witnesses willing to speak. Catherine," I remembered. "She knows everything. She was on her way to the hospital in Lancaster when I ran away." Miss Hayes nodded thoughtfully. "I'll check on that. If she's willing to testify, we have a chance." But it wasn't necessary. 3 days after my arrival in Los Angeles, the local newspaper ran a small article that Christian found by chance. "Man found dead in Tehachapi." Martin Silver, 45, owner of a small trucking company, was found dead in his office. Police are investigating the circumstances of his death, but suicide is suspected. The fight they were preparing for was over before it even began. This wasn't the justice of a courtroom, but a grim, final resolution delivered in the shadows. With the monster who haunted her nights now silenced forever, Genevieve could finally start facing the ghosts within. Let's hear how this news reshapes her path forward. Suicide? An accident? A fatal miscalculation? I never learned the true answer, but I've come to believe that justice doesn't always arrive with a judge's gavel. Sometimes it's just a vicious cycle finally closing in, devouring the very person who set it in motion. Suicide. The word hung between us like a ghost. Was it possible? Had Martin, upon waking from the sedation and discovering that I had fled and that Catherine had gone to the hospital, possibly to report him, decided there was no way out? We never knew for sure. A few weeks later, we received a letter from Lancaster. It was from Catherine, dictated to a nurse. Her handwriting was different, but the words were hers. "Genevieve," the letter began, "I hope this finds you well and safe. I have been in the hospital for almost a month. The tuberculosis has progressed a lot. The doctors don't give me much time. I need you to know, Martin is dead. They say it was suicide, that he took the leftover morphine pills. Maybe it was. Or maybe he tried to drug himself again, like he sometimes did, and miscalculated the dose. It doesn't matter now. What matters is that you are free. He will never hurt you or anyone else again. Before I die, I want you to know, I am sorry for everything. For not being strong enough to protect you sooner, for allowing everything to happen. The house in Tehachapi and what's left of his business are being liquidated to pay off debts. But there is a little money in an account at Bank of America. It's yours. It's not much, but maybe it will help you start over. Live your life to the fullest, Genevieve. Live for both of us. Catherine. Catherine. She was such a complicated woman, both my jailer and my liberator. She taught me that even in souls that seem broken beyond repair, a final, single act of redemption is possible. That letter wasn't just a goodbye. It was a release, for me and, I hope, for her soul as well. The letter, which had been forwarded from Christian's last known address, was accompanied by the bank account details and a power of attorney signed by Catherine, giving me the right to access the money. It wasn't a fortune, but for a 13-year-old girl who had arrived in Los Angeles with only the clothes on her back, it was a start. 2 weeks after receiving the letter, we learned that Catherine had passed away. Christian and I lit a candle for her, a complex woman who had been both accomplice and victim, both oppressor and liberator. In her final moments, she had chosen to do the right thing. That had to count for something. Life in Los Angeles began to take shape. Mrs. Thompson insisted that I stay with them. I have a spare room and enough money, she argued when I tried to protest. And it would be nice to have a young female presence in this house. I'm tired of only talking to mechanics who smell like oil. With the help of Miss Hayes, we got the documents that allowed me to enroll in the local school. I was behind in many subjects, but I studied with determination. In the evenings, I helped Mrs. Thompson in the kitchen, learning recipes, talking about everything and nothing. Christian worked hard at the shop. Slowly, the clientele grew. He had a natural talent for engines, an honesty that customers valued. He started giving me lessons, too. How to change a tire, how to check the oil, little maintenance things every woman should know, he would say. I never want you to depend on anyone ever again, he explained one night while showing me how to use a wrench. I want you to be free, truly free. Freedom. The word had a sweet taste in my mouth, a musical sound to my ears. After so long living in fear, freedom was intoxicating. The nightmares came, of course. Nights when I would wake up screaming, the ghost of Martin still vivid in my memory. Mrs. Thompson was always there, a silent, comforting presence, offering tea, a hand to hold, a shoulder to cry on. It will pass, she would assure me. Not completely, maybe. Some scars last forever. But the sharp pain, the terror, that passes. She was right. Over time, the nightmares became less frequent. The scared girl who had arrived in Los Angeles in 1965 began to blossom into a more confident, more secure young woman. Miss Hayes became a constant presence in our lives. She had dinner with us at least once a week, brought me books, discussed interesting cases in a language I could understand. You have a sharp mind, she commented once. Have you ever thought about studying law? The idea planted itself in my mind, growing slowly. Law, helping other people who had been through what I had been through, giving a voice to the voiceless. In 1968, 2 years after my arrival in Los Angeles, another turning point occurred in my life. Mrs. Thompson had a stroke. It wasn't severe, but it left her more fragile, with difficulty making certain movements. Christian and I took turns caring for her, he during the day, me at night and on weekends. Between that, school, and helping at the shop when I could, my days were full, but there was a purpose now. There was love, there was family. It was during this period that I met Walter. He was a customer at the shop, a serious young man, a few years older than me, who worked as an accountant at a bank. His car, a 1966 Volkswagen Beetle, constantly had problems that brought him to the shop. I think he makes up problems just to come here, Christian would tease, watching how Walter always showed up during the hours I was helping at the front desk. I would blush, deny it, but there was something in his eyes, in the way he treated me with respect, with patience, without pressure. Something that made me feel safe. Our first date was coffee at the diner across from the shop. We talked for hours about books, about music, about dreams. I told him about my ambition to study law. He told me about his desire to open his own accounting firm one day. I didn't talk about Martin, about the baths, about the horror of Tehachapi. Not yet. Some shadows were too heavy to bring into the light of a first date. More coffee dates followed. Then a movie, a walk in the park. Walter was patient, respectful, never trying to touch me without permission, never pushing for more than I was ready to give. When I finally told him my story, months later, sitting by the shore in Malibu on a Sunday afternoon, he listened in silence. There was no judgment in his eyes, only a deep sadness and a controlled anger. "I'm so sorry you went through that," he finally said, holding my hands gently. "No child should ever go through that. No person. I'm scared," I confessed. "Scared that it broke me in some way. Scared that I'll never be able to be normal." "Normal is overrated," he replied with a small smile. "And you're not broken. You're wounded, yes. Scarred, yes. But that only makes you stronger, more real." That day, for the first time since leaving Tehachapi, I allowed a man to hug me completely, without reservation, without fear. A small step, but a significant one. A step towards healing. I was 18. Walter was 23. Mrs. Thompson was more frail but still ruled her house with a firm hand. Christian now had a partner at the shop, expanding the business. And I, with the help of a scholarship and the money left by Catherine, was about to start law school at UCLA. Life had taken a direction I could never have imagined during those nights of terror in Tehachapi. The path had not been easy. I still carried scars, still had moments of darkness, but there was light now. So much light. One afternoon, while studying for my entrance exams, I found an old photo among my papers. Me and Christian in Canoga Park, before everything, two smiling children with no idea what the future held. I looked at that girl in the photo, at her innocent eyes, and I whispered, "We made it. We survived, and we're building something new and beautiful from the ashes." It was a promise, a commitment to keep moving forward, to turn pain into purpose, to use my story not as an anchor to pull me down, but as a beacon to light the way for others who were still lost in the darkness. And so, step by step, day by day, I rebuilt my life, not by erasing the past, but by incorporating it into a present I chose and a future I was designing with my own hands. Free. Finally free. Oh, how time flies. It feels like only yesterday I arrived in Los Angeles, a scared 3-year-old girl. And now here I am at 73, sitting on my porch overlooking the ocean, telling stories to you all. Los Angeles truly became my home. Here, I built my life, brick by brick. Here, I graduated from law school in 1977. I married my Walter in 1972, and we've been together for over 50 years. A good man who has never failed me, who has always been a partner and understanding of my invisible scars. We had 2 wonderful children, Julian, an engineer who lives in Chicago, and Martha, an environmental lawyer right here in Los Angeles. And my 3 grandchildren are the joy of my old age. Bryson, Lila, and little Clara, who always asks me why I leave the bathroom door open. Some habits you never lose, even after so many years. My career in law led me to work with women and children who were victims of violence. In 1985, I founded the New Beginning Support Center, which started as a small room in the back of an office and is now a respected organization in the city. I officially retired in 2015, but I never stopped helping. My brother Christian is still nearby with his wife Helen and their 3 children. Our family has grown, strengthened. Mrs. Thompson, that blessed lady who took us in, lived with us until she passed away in 1980. I try to honor her legacy of kindness every day. Now, on Tuesdays and Thursdays, I host my friends from the Threads of Life group for embroidery. Many of them are women I met at New Beginnings, who carry stories similar to mine. We embroider and talk, and our creations are donated to hospitals and shelters. It's our way of turning pain into beauty. When I look at the ocean at dusk, I think of all the paths that brought me here. The difficult ones, the painful ones, but also the ones filled with light. I think of the terrified girl I was and the woman I have become, and I feel a deep peace. Not because I have forgotten, but because I have chosen, day after day, not to be defined by what was done to me, but by what I chose to do with the life I have. The life I have today, with Walter, my children, and my grandchildren, is a gift I never take for granted. Do you remember how this story began? about how hot water could feel as cold as ice in the shower. For many years after I escaped, I was still afraid of the sound of running water. But now, I live by the ocean. Every morning I walk on the sand and let the waves wash over my feet. The ocean doesn't erase the memories, but it taught me an important lesson. Water can also be a symbol of healing, of cleansing, and of vastness. It reminds me that after the most violent storm, the sea will become calm again. The storm inside of you will pass too. Don't drown in it. Learn to be your own lighthouse, strong and steady until the dawn breaks. And before I say goodbye, if you've watched this far, please comment with the word peace. It is the most sincere wish I want to send to everyone listening to this story. Your support through a like and a subscription is invaluable encouragement for me to continue this journey. Remember this, my dears. You are so much stronger than your storm. Amen.